What is up, you guys? Glitches here, and welcome back to the channel. Today I'm bringing you my very first Dauntless Awakening build. I'm really excited about it. It's actually going to be using the Alluring Moons Repeaters, the new repeaters that you get from the Hunt Pass. I've actually had a bunch of people already in the comments of previous videos saying they tried out the repeaters and they're trash, and I'm hoping that by the end of this video I can prove all the naysayers wrong, because I've done some testing and I think the build that I've come up with is pretty overpowered and can handle any of the end game hardest difficulty content with ease, in my opinion. So without any further ado, let's jump into it. I will preface this by saying that this video will probably be a little bit longer, so I'm going to drop some timestamps down in the description with everything labeled so you guys can skip to the different sections a little bit quicker. And I will also be using a Dauntless Builder link down in the description. It'll probably be the first link in the description leading to this entire build fully fleshed out on the Dauntless Builder website. So once you're done watching the video, you can just click that link and use that as almost like a little cheat sheet, so you guys can look at it and use it as reference and build it later on. So be sure to check that out as well. But the first thing that I obviously want to go over is the weapons and armor. So obviously we're going to be using the Alluring Moons Repeaters. This has three really cool abilities that are super unique and haven't been seen in Dauntless before. The first special ability is called Lure. You lure 2 random Chaox to fight at your side for up to 90 seconds. Now before I get into the details of this, one thing I do want to mention is there are actually 3 different types of lesser Chaoxes that can spawn. One is a like white and gray shark fin lesser raptor that is more of like a flanker. It goes for like behind attacks on the behemoth. Then there's a red parrot looking raptor. That is a ranged raptor. That one will like throw boulders and things like that. And then there's an up and close in your face raptor that has like a boulder kind of like skull helmet on it. And that's just a in your face like stagger, not stagger damage, but just a up front and in close and personal attacker, if you will, for the lesser behemoths. Or lesser Chaox raptors rather. So 3 different random ones can spawn. You never know which ones are going to spawn when you do this ability. And once we go into the weapon upgrades, all of these abilities are going to get revamped and kind of upgraded in their own unique ways as well. So right now it says 2 random Chaoxes spawn, but that'll eventually turn into 3 with some of the upgrades we're going to take. The passive is going to be called Call of the Void. Occasionally spawn an orb of umbral energy nearby that can be attacked by you or any other slayer in your party and send a spray of umbral blasts in the direction that you hit it, hopefully hitting behemoths, doing a ton of extra damage. This will also get modified with our upgrades to make them even better, and it actually is one of the only tools for the gun itself that can interrupt behemoths. So if you spawn multiple of these orbs all over the place and you know what behemoth is about to do an interrupt attack, like an Ember Main or a Shrike Glide and things like that, I typically try and leave one of these purple orbs on the field at any given point just for those situations, because if you line it up right, you can just shoot it dead on and those orbs are going to fan out and it will just instantly interrupt any behemoth within the wave of orbs that it's going to like unleash once you destroy it. So that is one really good interrupt ability. And with the alternate weapon, our support weapon they're going to be taking, we're going to have the best interrupt tool in the game as well to complement that. But moving on to the most important perk, the legendary perk, it's called Leader of the Pack. You call an Umbral Chaox, which is like a giant raptor version, to fight at your side for up to 300 seconds, so a really long time. It deals greater damage than the normal lesser Chaoxes and can use any of those 3 abilities that the lesser Chaoxes use. I mentioned that there's 3 different random ones, each with their own different attack type. That Umbral Chaox, the big Leader of the Pack one, can do any of those 3 at any given point. So it has all the abilities built into one, and that will also get upgraded to be even better once we go into the weapon upgrades. So let's go ahead and look at that. So we go to weapon talents, and by the way, pro tip, I noticed a lot of people didn't realize this when they were starting out, but these weapon talents that you upgrade at Will's Born, you don't have to get these in sequential order. As long as your weapon is leveled up high enough, you can pick and choose the exact upgrade you want at any given point. You don't have to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You can go 1, 3, 5. Like you notice these in the middle ones, I didn't even bother unlocking these because I did my research and I knew which ones I wanted to pick. So don't waste all of your Apex like glimmer shards and all of your resources unlocking every single one of these. Just wait until your weapon is the proper level and then just pick and choose the exact ones that you want. to save on resources and rare materials. But for the primary buff, this particular weapon uses might. The one thing that I try to avoid is things that just make your buffs last longer. I preferred having held buffs, which means you're just going to permanently have it always. So that's why I take buff 1, 3, and 5, because that will give us 3 guaranteed might at all times. So right out the gate, 3 might stacks right from the get-go, even before we summon our Chaoxes, just because we have these weapons equipped. Then moving on to the weapon special upgrades, this is that lure ability that summons the 2 Chaoxes. The first perk we're going to take is Special 1, which will add 1 additional Chaox whenever we do that ability. So now whenever we cast it, we're going to be summoning 3 lesser Chaoxes. Then I take Special 2, which will give us 1 held defense for each friendly Chaox that's nearby to a maximum of 5. And by the end of this build, we will be able to summon up to 7 Raptors at once. So you're pretty much guaranteed to hit that maximum 5 stacks of defense for a ton of extra damage reduction for those harder difficulty content in the late game. And then for the third perk that I take is going to be Special 4. You have 2 held speed while at least 1 friendly Chaox is present, which is pretty much always. The whole build revolves around these pets, so you want to have them up at all times. So that's 2 additional speed that we're going to be having for this build. And for those of you that don't know, speed is very, very important on repeaters. You want to be able to get those multiple shots off as quickly as possible. Helps you charge your full bore chamber shots faster, and just pumps out more damage because it's single shots only. So the faster your speed is, the faster you're going to shoot and burn through your clip. So really good buff there that we're always going to be having, because we'll always have pets. Moving on to the secondary buff, the repeaters in this case have defense. So this is going to be 3 more guaranteed defense stacks that we're going to be getting. Again, I don't take the ones that extend the duration. I take the flat defense to just guaranteed have held defense at all times. Moving on to the weapon passive, this is for upgrades to the Umbral Orbs. The first one is going to be passive 1. Call of the Void unleashes 2 additional Umbral Orbs when struck. So that first orb that you shoot, normally it splits off into like maybe 2 or 3. Now it's going to split off into 4 or 5 just for 1 orb. But then that gets upgraded even further with passive number 3, where an additional Call of the Void orb appears somewhere nearby the behemoth. So anytime you would summon the first orb, you're going to be summoning 2 of them now. So that's up to like 8 to 10 of those orbs that can launch right out the gate if you destroy those orbs. And with the third perk, passive number 4, it's going to make all of those void orbs do 20% more damage. So if you can get a close-up shot with one of those cones where all 10 of those 2 orb shots spread and all hit the behemoth, that's thousands and thousands of extra damage you're going to be getting for shooting those orbs, and they're actually way stronger than you actually anticipate. And like I mentioned before, the more orbs we have, the higher chances that we're going to have of interrupting behemoths if that opportunity arises. Once you get that many orbs spawning, they start shooting in every direction. So pretty much wherever the behemoth is, even if you're not like aligned perfectly, you can shoot it from any angle, and you're almost guaranteed to have at least 2 or 3 of them shoot like sideways and hit whatever you're normally fighting, which is really, really cool. And then for the last upgrade, this is for our legendary buff for Leader of the Pack. The first one that I take is Legendary 3, which will summon another Raptor when we do our Leader of the Pack summon. Then I take Legendary 4, which summons another Legendary Pack. So between the Lure ability, that's going to summon 3 instant lesser Raptors. And then with our Legendary ability, that will summon our Leader of the Pack Raptor and 2 more lessers. So right out the gate, in the beginning of every single fight, you're instantly going to be getting 6 Raptors right away. And then with one of the perks that we're going to be taking, we'll be able to get 1 or 2 more, depending on how many we have on the field. And then the last perk that I take is Legendary 5, which is going to make your Leader of the Pack cause all 6 of those lesser Raptors to attack 15% faster, obviously doing a ton more damage. One thing that I did test out was Legendary 2, which makes the Umbral Chaox do 20% more damage by itself. But what I found is on harder difficulty content that the matches last a little bit longer. The extra 15% attack speed on these 6 lesser Raptors ended up being a much larger total DPS output that you were going to be doing compared to just having the 20% on your one Leader of the Pack Raptor. So that's why I went that route. We're going to have so many Raptors out that with the additional attack speed, you'll get more DPS from your lesser ones than you will on the big one. So those are the talents for the Alluring Moons. Moving on to our support weapon. The best in slot, in my opinion, is going to be the Anvil. This is the new Frost Hammer. This one we're actually not really going to be attacking with. We're strictly going to be using this for support. If you rank it up to fully level 60, which isn't necessary technically for this build, you only need to be level 30 to be able to unlock all the upgrades that we need. But if you do get it to level 60, it will still be very viable against enemies like Skarn and enemies that are like really weak to stagger damage. So in that rare instance, you may want to switch to it because that type of weapon will just by default be a little bit better. But the main perk that we're going to be using this for is going to be its special ability, the Mighty Landbreaker. Activate the special to open a crack in the ground that allows slayers to instantly gain 3 stacks of might. That's 30% bonus damage by walking over it. Create 1 pickup per ammo spent, and a slayer cannot gain this benefit more than once every 45 seconds. Ideally, you're going to be doing a lot of this content solo or maybe with 1 extra player, so not all of those 5 ammo charges are going to be used up, which means that the crack in the ground is actually going to stay in the arena for an extended period of time, and that's actually important because of one of the upgrades we're going to be taking that I'll go over here in a minute. For the passive, it has a pretty cool one called Frozen Mines. We won't see this too often, but in the rare instance where we are swapping, depending on a viable behemoth that we might be fighting, what this does is on a successful dodge, it creates 2 ice mines on the ground, which will become 3 with some of the upgrades we're taking, that damages any behemoth that walks over it, and recharges every 15 seconds. And then the final legendary ability, which is the main reason we're taking it, is the Wall. This is the amazing interrupt ability that the old Frost Urska legendary weapons used to have. You summon that ice wall, it does a ton of damage to the behemoth, freezes them in place for several seconds, and acts as one of the best interrupt tools in the game. So as I mentioned previously, repeaters don't really have a ton of options for interrupting behemoths, with the exception of those umbral orbs, which can be kind of gimmicky. If you don't have one up at the exact moment a behemoth is doing an interrupt attack, you might not be able to do it. Having this hammer, though, will give us a guaranteed option almost always to just quickly swap to it, use the legendary ability, which we're going to have a ton of cooldown reduction on, to just throw out that wall anytime you need it to get a very, very easy interrupt on behemoths like Embermane and Koshai and things like that do leap attacks all the time. So really, really good interrupt tool, and that's the main reason we're taking it there. But going on to the weapon talents. Again, all the talents before we go into this are going to be based around more supporting abilities. So the primary buff on this weapon is going to be Vitality, and much like the Alluring Moons, I don't unlock the ones that make the duration longer. I just go straight for the guaranteed held stacks. So we got the 3 held stacks of Vitality. The most important perks are going to be for the weapon special. This is that Mighty Landbreaker attack, and this is where it gets really strong. The first perk that we take is Special 1, increases the might granted by Mighty Landbreaker by an additional stack. So now as soon as you walk over that crack, you're instantly going to be getting 4 stacks of might, which is 40% more damage. And then the second special one that we're going to be take will give 2 held defense while the Mighty Landbreaker crack is still on the ground. So like I said a second ago, why that it's important if you're running solo or duo to have multiple charges in that crack is because if not every slayer takes it, that crack will stay in the arena passively for a pretty long period of time, which is just passively going to give us 2 additional stacks of defense and give us more damage reduction for that later game content. And then the last and coolest one, in my opinion, is going to be Special 5, which will grant all slayers that walk over the crack a actual critical stack. So that's higher crit chance and higher crit damage. So all in all, with just this one ability, as long as your crack stays on the ground at the beginning of the arena, you're going to be getting 2 held stacks of defense, 4 held stacks of might, and a stack of critical from 1 ability. And what we're going to be doing is at the beginning of every fight, you're going to initiate with this hammer, immediately drop this Mighty Landbreaker buff on the ground, walk over it, and then instantly swap to your repeaters, and then just take advantage of all of those buffs on your repeaters instead of the hammer. So all the stuff we're getting from the hammer, we're just feeding that into our repeater weapon. And then for the secondary buff, this weapon has might. Not as important because we're not going to be using this as our primary weapon, but it will make our ice wall and things like that do a little bit more damage. So again, much like Vitality, I take the guaranteed 3 held points. So the 3 points in held might there. Moving on to the weapon passive, this is what upgrades those ice mines. I said normally it drops 2, but passive 1 will increase that drop rate by 1, so now it'll drop 3. The next perk I take is passive 3, which will increase the damage of all 3 of those mines by another 20%. And then the final one is going to be passive 4, which will give us 2 held speed as long as there's an undetonated mine somewhere on the ground. So in the rare instance where you get a dodge with a hammer and you have a few mines randomly scattered throughout that you aren't using and Behemoth isn't nearby it, that additional speed will just make our repeaters shoot that much faster and just give us an additional source of speed stacks in the rare instance where we might need it. And then last but not least, for the legendary ability, this is what's going to upgrade our ice wall. I take both cooldown perks, so legendary 1 will reduce it by 20 seconds, legendary 5 will reduce it by 20 seconds, so 40-second cooldown on the ice wall cast. So that'll pretty much guarantee that we have it up at the beginning of every single round. You don't have to worry about cooldown, it'll be fast enough. And then I also take legendary 2, which will give Slayers another 2 defense stacks for more damage reduction anytime that you touch the wall during the fight for you and any party member that's on your team. So more damage reduction there, which is always good for harder content as well. So those are the weapon talents for both of the weapons. Moving on to the armor. For the helmet, we run the Boreal Epiphany. This built-in has Tenacious and Berserker. Berserker is an 8-point talent. We will not have that in this build, unfortunately. We just don't have the points for it, so you can just ignore that. But we do get Tenacious from it, which you have 1 held stack of might for every 400 HP that you have. And with these stacks of vitality that we get from the hammer and the sources from the different upgrades that we're taking, you get like 2 or 3 additional might. So right at the start of a fight, as long as you have your repeaters out, before you even summon any of your raptors, you've got like 5 or 6 might right out of the gate, which is insane. And then for the cell, we're going to be putting a Defiant cell on it. This was just the throwaway perk. It was the only other offensive perk that was available, given the armor that we're using for the build. So I wanted to make sure that if we're going to be getting points in it, we might as well fill it out and actually get some benefits from it. And what Defiance does is you gain more stacks of defense whenever a behemoth enters the rage state, which is when they turn red and they become even stronger. So if they're stronger, get some more defense and you'll have more survivability. Always good. Just for icing on the cake, if you will. It's just an added little buff we're going to be getting. But moving on to, and this also has a pack collar on it, which is going excuse me, going to be one of the most important cells. You spawn 1 Chaos Raptor when a behemoth part is broken. This was what I was telling you is going to help us get to that max 7 raptors. We get 3 from lure, 3 from our legendary, and then pack collar is what's going to allow us to get that additional 1 or 2 anytime we break a behemoth part. So a really cool buff there and pretty much a must-have on pet builds. Moving on to the chest, we have the lightning plate. This will have 2 Evasive Fury perks on it, and what Evasive Fury does is after dodging through an attack, you gain 1 stack of speed. So again, we want to try and get as much speed as possible to fire our bullets as quickly as possible, get our full bore chamber shots as quickly as possible, and things like that. And when we combo this with a potential Omnicell, it'll ramp up even quicker. But I'll go over that in a minute. The other important perk that is built into this armor is going to be Pack Walker. This is another go-to ability that I would guarantee, or not guarantee, but recommend you take for summoner type builds. You gain another 3 stacks of held speed while you're near a creature or fauna, and all of your raptors are considered creatures and fauna. So we're going to have raptors out all the time. So that's a guaranteed another 3 stacks that we're going to be getting of speed to help our repeaters even more. So it combos and synergizes really, really well. You're going to be hitting max speed pretty much all the time. You're going to be firing like crazy. It's pretty nuts. Moving on to the gloves, we have the Boreal Might. This has Berserker and Tenacious built in. Again, Berserker you can ignore, but we are putting the pack collar cell in here to make sure that we reach the full limit that is required in order to activate it. And then it also has Tenacious. So that is where we are also getting the other points to activate the Tenacious perk. It's built into these gloves. And then moving on to the boots, we have the Lightning Boots. This has Evasive Fury built in as well as Defiance, so that's what's helping us reach the activation point for those 2 perks. And then we're putting 2 Pack Walker cells on there. Those 2 cells are what will allow us to get to the +6 to activate that perk. So all in all, the way it stands is we have fully activated Evasive Fury, Pack Collar, Pack Walker, Tenacious, and Defiance. All synergize really well, all give bonus speed, all give bonus defense stacks, really good. The only thing that we don't meet the requirement for is Berserker, which isn't required. Once you see the damage this build does, it's honestly not necessary. But moving on to Tonics. I actually might switch this out. Right now, I'm using a Blitz Tonic. This will give 2 stacks of speed, but I actually might recommend switching to the Insight Tonic. And the reason being is repeaters, for those of you that don't know, are actually considered piercing weapons, which means they do wound damage, much like the Chain Blades and the War Pike. And one thing that's really cool with wound weapons is if you wound a behemoth, you activate something called Aether Surge. And what Aether Surge is, it's another really strong buff that you get anytime that you wound a behemoth or attack a part that has been wounded, if you're another secondary player on a particular behemoth. And that buff gives you increased weapon damage, increased attack speed, and increased movement speed, I believe. So it's like a 3-in-1 buff that you get every time that you wound a behemoth. So swapping out Blitz Tonic, because we're already getting a ton of speed stacks from other sources, might be the best option here, because that will give 40% increased wound damage to let us activate Aether Rush more frequently and get those wounds out even quicker. But then I also take Frenzy Tonic, which will be another 2 guaranteed held stacks of might for 15 seconds anytime, and it adds 15 seconds to your might stacks anytime you're nearby an enraged behemoth. So that'll just give us more flat out damage, which is nice. For the Omnicells, you have 2 options. For harder end game content, the one that I would really recommend using is going to be Iceborne. Ice Lance is just super strong, especially in lower level content. If you crit, it can do upwards of 5,000 to 6,000 damage, just throwing it out there. And when you land in the attack with Ice Lance, you gain stagger protection and 10% lifesteal for 8 seconds after throwing it. And then the passive, which is the main reason I take it for survivability, gives you 1 more held stack of vitality, which is going to increase our health pool, and defense for more damage reduction. You also get +1 lifesteal and +1 held stacks of defense for every 150 health missing. So if you're doing really hard content and you get hit by something really big, all of that health that you lose is going to increase your lifesteal, increase your defense, and allow you to regen super quick when you're using this Omnicell. Now, if you're doing lower level content and you don't really have to worry about damage or getting hit that often, or even if you do, you don't have to worry about dying. The other really strong that complements very well with this build that I would recommend is going to be the Tempest Omnicell. The Storm Dash is just insane. It does bonus damage to unbroken parts. I'm sure you guys in the past have seen builds with Tempest. Some of the one-shot builds used this Omnicell. You just run around, gain up stacks of speed, activate it, dash forward, and just pretty much instantly break a behemoth part right away. But the passive, which is really good and has really nice synergy with this build, will gain 1 additional speed stack every time you do a successful dodge. So you combine that with the evasive fury cells that we're taking with our armor, and that will give us 2 stacks of speed every time we do a dodge. So you're going to be ramping up your speed stacks to max very quick, especially if you're using the Tempest Omnicell. So those 2 options are really good. Again, Tempest for early to mid-game content where you don't have to worry about dying as often, because it's just going to be much more damage and you'll be able to get your speed stacks faster. But if you're doing heroic content and like those surge hunting ground islands, I would recommend Iceborne because you're going to have a lot more survivability. So that is the build. One little thing that I want to point out, if you guys haven't seen, I have the coolest transmog on right now. Wanted to make it look as cool of like a tribal hunter pet summoner type aesthetic as you could. But what's really neat is the weapons right now by default are purple, which do match. But if we go to the hunt pass and look at the final skin, these are going to match really well as well. So I'm not saying you have to copy my transmog, but when this thing's fully maxed out and we get all the upgrades, this is going to be a really cool flashy looking build as well. So it looks cool and does a ton of damage. So speaking of damage, I can't really talk about it unless I prove it. So I'm going to say my goodbyes now, and I'm actually going to leave you guys with a 10 to 50 solo Terra escalation run just to show off the kind of mechanics of how I operate during, well, not during, but while I'm using this build, and just show how strong it actually is. So look forward to that. But if you enjoyed it, if you found it informative, be sure to like and comment down below. I appreciate all of you guys' feedback. And if you want to keep up to date on my future content, I've got a bunch more builds in the works and obviously more generic Dauntless content planned, consider subscribing and turn on that notification bell so you don't miss any of those future updates. And then last but not least, if you want to join a killer community of like-minded gamers, feel free to check those links down in the description and join us on the Discord. We've got over 1,000 members in there now, many of which are playing Dauntless. So hopefully you jump in and we see you guys around here soon. But until the next one, hope everyone has a great day, and we'll see you all on the Shattered Isles.
Something tells me you won't have to look far for your quarry. Good luck down there, Captain.